Settle down on the Wiggly sofa for your weekly escape to rural Herefordshire. Join us every Monday as we cover the environment, farming, biodiversity and the things we can all do to make a difference. Plus, you'll learn about life at Wiggly Wigglers, current small business champions for the UK. I'm Nikki, one of the phone team here at Wiggly Wigglers. I take your orders, especially bouquets, which are done by my mum. And yes, it was my grandfather up the tree. Your co-hosts today are Heather and Rachel.
Rach! Girl power, baby!
Hooray!
He's not here!
Yeah, he's not here!
Now, we've got a secret, haven't we? Sat here on the desk. She rustles paper. Nikki, what have we got?
We've got the Wiggly book.
Ooh. What do you think of it?
I think it's fantastic.
It is. Cool, isn't it?
Pictures are amazing. The writing, the font, everything is just amazing.
But I just must mention your contribution.
Oh no.
Here we are. I mean, we mustn't, give too much away about the book, but just to read out this little bit of Nikki writing. She talks about looking ahead with the garden and how it's gone. There's one thing, though, that I would really like to see in the garden to improve it. Chris Beardshaw. Now that would improve things no end. I will gladly give up any spare time to help that one come to pass.
He could fly in with his helicopter any day.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Nikki.
That's okay.
Thank you, Toast, for that little gulp. Rach, it's nice to have you, but why are you here? Where is Roving Ricardo?
Roving Ricardo is at home all week. He's decided to take Easter week off and spend it at home with his wife.
Very nice.
Very nice,
So,
yeah.
Hello, Richard. Hope you're having a nice time.
Yeah.
And we do hope you went to the talk in Wiltshire last night.
Yes, absolutely.
Not that we think he's unreliable.
No.
Anyway, we brought in Farmer Phil, so welcome, Farmer Phil.
Hello.
How do you feel in amongst all these women?
Well, with my mate Ricardo not here, it's not good. But then again, I expect Sarah will be fed up with him by now, so that he'll be back next week.
On the show this week, we've got loads of feedback. If you remember, we mentioned the fact that the only reviews we had on iTunes were from men. So, of course, this week we've got acres of letters from women. So that's great. So we'll talk about those in a moment. We've got Al coming in with Plant of the Week, which is Lady's Smock. Monty's in with his Wormcast. And we've got a Roving Ricardo report.
Right.
So
Great.
we'll be there with that.
Yeah.
And we've also got a Farmer Phil report. The Wiggly chickens have arrived, Rach.
I've seen them.
What do you reckon?
And so far you've had how many eggs?
2 eggs
Right.
in 2 days.
And the most interesting thing is what you've called them.
They're named after Monty's 2 grannies. One, sadly, is not with us anymore. And so that's Lillian, the chicken. And the other one is Valerie, the chicken. So welcome to Lillian and Valerie. They're 2 brown hens. Anyway, get straight into this feedback. We've got a letter from Hayley Brennan, and she writes, Dear team, I finally caught up and listened to all of your podcasts. I've heard your weekly advice rant giggle about all things natural in a newspaper article just after Christmas. I love the show, especially the rows. And as a little thank you, have enclosed some Milka. I hope you have the decency to share some of this with the others, Heather. What a shame she put that, because there was just this little thought that I had that maybe
The thing is, Rach, did we ever find out exactly how much Milka she sent?
No.
I did have some, but I never established the total quantity.
No.
Well, there was 3 bars, and I've eaten 2. And Richard's got one on his desk. And she says the best chocolate shop in the whole world is Pierre Marcolini, and it's in Brussels.
Wow.
And so I'm off to Brussels later in the year, so I'm going to go there and check it out. And she's also talked about Ford Hall Farm, with Charlotte and Ben raising money to save their farm from development. I don't know if anyone saw the Telegraph article on Saturday by
did.
Sally Williams, but it was a brilliant article. And I've just been to the Ford Hall Farm website, and they've now raised over £100,000 towards their £800,000 total. So things go well, but if you're interested in buying a share in Ford Hall Community Farm, go to fordhallfarm.com. Rach, you've got some feedback.
I have, all from ladies that we've asked to give us some feedback from. One is from Vicky Cowles, and she's one of our competition winners on the podcast, and she sent us in comments, as in she works from home, and so in the Monday afternoons she always sits and has a cup of tea and listens to our podcasts, and she absolutely loves them. And we asked for suggestions, and one of her suggestions was, why not make the podcasts into 2 sessions, recording it all in one go and do the editing in one go, but save it in 2 halves and broadcast twice a week. She's a musician, so she knows a little bit about recording. So we'll put it to our guy, Vicky, and see what he says.
I can see Michael, he's just tearing up what little hair he's got left out.
That's right, absolutely. So we'll see what we can do on that one. We've got another one from Carol Needham. She's had a problem with her can of worms that's been totally solved. She's very happy with that. And she's now started listening to the Wiggly Podcasts. She says, keep up the brilliant podcasts. Even my husband and noisy 7-year-old son quietly listen to them. So thank you, Carol, for that. And the next one is from Melanie Matthews. Melanie writes, thank you for the catalogues and the lovely raffle prize which we donated. She's having an open day at their allotment. It's called Rags Allotment Society. She said, I'm determined to turn all the allotmenteers into Wiggly fans, and I'll let you know how the open day goes on the 20th of May. So good luck with that, Melanie.
Talking of allotments, we've got another bit of feedback from Frankie, who's a lady, and she's from Allotment 21. She says, spouse says, the podcasts are like listening to Radio 4, only they're interesting. But the real point about Frankie is that she had a cam box from Wiggly's for Christmas, and she's got Blue Tits nest building in it. And she put pictures and links up on her blog at www.allotment21.blogspot.com. And so we sent Richard, the roving reporter, to see Frankie's Blue Tits.
She's just arrived. She's just landed in the nest. So, Frankie, paint us a picture. What's she doing?
Well, she comes in and you can hear her. She calls to the male and he's outside, and she gets all around the edge of the nest. There's bits of fluff and feathers and fur that she's brought in during the day, and she just gathers it in really and weaves it into the base of the nest. So, I mean, it literally is feathering the nest, isn't it? You can just hear them calling to each other. It's ever so sweet. And after a while, it won't take very long, she'll just pop her head under the wing and puff up and roost.
She's a lovely little plump bird.
She's enormous, isn't she? Yeah. She's looking out of the hole now. You can just see her. And she's left.
She's weaved her way around in a lovely little, tight little nest. And,
but it does change every time she goes in. You keep thinking, right, that's it, finished. But she just
weaves.
Not
quite right.
No. But I'm so pleased she made an appearance.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, at least we've seen her. So hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll be back and we'll see lots of little yellow gapes.
I hope so.
Yeah, fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
Thank you, Richard, for that. Talking of birdies, I've heard from Jane Markham, who makes the RSPB Bird Notes podcast. She's a radio producer and a radio announcer for the BBC for years and things. Anyway, she's made 2 pilot podcasts for the RSPB, and she's written to say, congratulations, you have a great podcast, which is very entertaining, full of information. And she says Monty's a bit of a star. She also makes podcasts. And so we've had several people who've wanted to know how we do it and whatever. So she makes them. So that's Jane Markham from RSPB Bird Notes podcast. And Phil, you've got some news on wiggly birds, I think.
Yeah, well, some weeks ago now, Rich put up a barn owl box in one of our barns, in a modern barn, steel frame barn. And I have to say I was a bit cynical. We've got barn owls, as you know, and they nest in the trees and they seem quite happy. But we thought, well, we'll put the box up partly as a demonstration as to how to put it up and see what happens. And the other night I saw a barn owl fly out of that barn, so fingers crossed.
So is it in the cattle shed with the cattle? Or?
Next door. It's in the shed that we store the cattle's hay and straw in.
That's good. It's a shame we haven't got a camera in there.
Yeah, that'd be fun,
Yeah,
wouldn't
then
it?
we could watch it.
So tell us what's been happening in the cow shed, Phil.
Well, we've had what in the trade is known as a bad week of it, really, one way or another. We've told you about our assorted sets of twins over the past few weeks and months, and the other day, the second pair of twins, one of them in the morning was just dead. 3 months old, as far as we could tell, perfectly healthy, shiny coat, eating and drinking well, no trouble at all, just dead.
So that's fairly unusual in itself.
It is unusual, but having said that, the one thing that we have noticed with twins is that they do seem more susceptible to having congenital defects, and you can run into problems with hearts and things like that. If you're going to have that sort of problem, those are the ones that are most likely to have it. So we thought, well, sod's law, that's how it is. The other twin seems absolutely fine. We did ask the vet, had he got any thoughts on time of year, should we do anything? And he said, well, not really. I think it's probably sod's law, carry on. And so we did. And 4 days later, its sibling dropped dead in identical circumstances. And we thought, well, that's not as it should be at all. And so I got our local vet to do a post-mortem, which is a surgical investigation to try and find out what happened to it. Very sadly, we're here on Bill Main, our friend and vet's front drive, performing a post-mortem on the second of our twins, which very sadly, both of the second set have died within the last week, inexplicably, suddenly, and for no reason. They were both fit and well, eating and drinking well, and 4 days ago the heifer calf dropped dead overnight, and this morning the bull calf was found dead similarly. And so we've decided that we ought to try and find out what's gone wrong and why it's gone wrong. So Bill has basically made an incision behind the calf's shoulder, and he's heading towards the body cavity with a view, I suspect, of investigating its vital organs for any obvious signs of trauma or damage.
We'll have to be very careful about what we do, because we're going to have to stitch it back together again after we've done this post-mortem. The local hunt kennels, unfortunately, will not accept carcasses which have been opened up and not closed again, so it does limit the extent that we can actually open animals up when we're doing post-mortems.
And is that a government legislation, Bill, or is that just a preference of the kennels?
It's government legislation, mainly because we have leakage of specified offal, really, one of which is blood, and that's not allowed anywhere now in this country. It all has to be collected and kept in one place, and leakage of internal body fluids and any other bits that might fall out of a post-mortem animal is deemed to be illegal. So we will progress with great care.
And what's your first impressions on looking at the carcass?
First impression is that it's a good, well-conditioned carcass. The animal's got body fat in it. It's pale, which is common obviously in a calf that's only being fed on milk. It's not much more than a veal calf, really, at this stage. For it to have died suddenly, we're either looking at a metabolic cause or we're looking at infectious cause, and in this case we have the inherent possibility of something else going wrong. The fact that its twins died, but whether there's a genetic element in it. But at the moment we're struggling here just to get into the ribs and get into the chest cavity without actually making too much of a mess for the kennels.
Speaking to you earlier on today, your suspicions lie in something like a magnesium deficiency, and so far You haven't really found anything to
Well,
dissuade you from that idea,
no,
have
not really. There are no clinical signs on post-mortem with magnesium deficiency. Magnesium deficiency, there are no obvious signs on post-mortem, and you can only diagnose magnesium deficiency either on a sample of the aqueous fluid from the eyeball or from the first coccygeal bone, really, or the lack of all other findings.
To that end, we have taken a sample of its aqueous humour, but you found something that doesn't look terribly pleasant there, or is that normal?
Absolutely. That's very abnormal here.
And you're looking there at the upper reaches of its digestive tract, are you?
Yeah, just let me actually have a look and see here. Well, this is a first on me, Philip. Okay.
Well, we seem to have found the problem, and not being a vet myself, I'll let Bill describe what he's found and what his conclusions are.
Yeah, well, Philip, we've got something here which is fairly unusual. I've certainly never seen it before in a calf at all. It's something we recognise often in dogs and cats, but this animal's got adhesions throughout its chest cavity. It's got a thickened pericardial sac, which is the sac in which the heart sits in. And when we went through, as you saw there, we went through the mediastinum, which is the sort of the curtain which suspends the lungs from one side of the lung field to the other side of the lung field. We've suddenly got all this dark coloured fluid with flecks of material in it. And then we actually have seen there is a piece of the rumen, which is the stomach, has gone through into the chest cavity from the abdomen through a hole in the diaphragm, which is the big muscular sheet which separates the chest cavity from the abdominal cavity. So, in other words, as this calf's got bigger and bigger and bigger, more food has gone into its stomach, more straw and roughage, which has expanded the stomach, and that has pushed the stomach through a pre-existing defect in the diaphragm muscle, which separates the chest cavity from the abdominal cavity, to such a point where it's actually ruptured, and it's at that point the calf has died. We don't know how many calves have this, and they're perfectly okay. It's really very, very unusual, and you can see the discoloration in the lungs. The part of the lungs adjacent to this hole have really gone quite dark and quite black. The rest of the lung field is okay, and it would tie in with this calf's twin dying suddenly for unexplained reasons, because, as I say, this is a congenital defect. We've been born with it, and it is thought to have a hereditary factor in it. So it's certainly a first for me. It's good for you because it's a one-off thing. It's not going to affect the rest of the herd, but it's obviously, unfortunately, a very sad affair for you.
So, put simply, basically, we have the situation where the lungs, instead of moving smoothly and silkily within the lung cavity, they've stuck to the outside, and that the gut has ruptured effectively through a hole in the diaphragm and leaked some of its contents, which are highly infectious and horrible.
It's not so much infection, it's just killed the animal by shock. A ruptured bowel is a very serious effect if it happens in the abdomen, and it's an extremely serious effect if it happens in the chest. And it'll be the shock that would have occurred from the rupturing of the bowel which has killed this animal. If the bowel had not ruptured, then we would probably have never ever have known that this animal had this defect. It all depends on the size of the rupture in the first place, doesn't it?
Well, very sad, but at least we now know that there was absolutely nothing we could have done about it.
Absolutely.
And I'm grateful to you for taking your Saturday afternoon out to find this out for me. Hopefully we won't see it again.
I hope not to.
Whew. Well, I reckon that has got to be a first. Bearing in mind that I think we've got the first farming and gardening podcast in the UK, that simply must be the first calves post-mortem, if a little gloomy and a little gory, if I might say, Farmer Phil.
Well, a little bit, but there were positives to be taken out of it. in as much that having made the discovery that we did, there was absolutely nothing that we could have done differently to have changed the situation, which is good from our point of view. And it gives closure to it. It was very satisfying to know the reason why it happened, and the suspicion is that it happened to its sibling as well, so that while it is gloomy, it is nice to know the reasons.
And it was carried out on a drive in a cul-de-sac in a village.
Well, that's right.
Well, what is that about?
Well, basically that was because it was on a Saturday afternoon, out of hours, and Bill the vet lives just down the road, and although it sounds as if we conducted a major bloodbath on his drive, it's not like that at all, but it was carried out in the back of the truck on his drive just because of it being Saturday afternoon.
Any net curtains flickering?
Well, a little bit here and there, you know. I think they're used to him by now, though.
Well, I think that the next thing that I'm going to get you to record is a live carving. So we've got the other end of the spectrum.
Well, I expect, sadly for you, that'll have to be you doing the recording while I do the carving. So.
Anyway, Phil, we've got a bit of feedback from Robert Grange on hedgerows. Thank God Richard isn't here, Rach.
I know, he'd make you do another podcast on it, I'm sure.
So we'll do this bit of feedback while he's away. Robert's a cyclist in Herefordshire, and he says, can I make a plea that those responsible for trimming hedges obey the law and clear the trimmings from the road afterwards? I realise that this must seem to be a time-consuming task, but surely with modern equipment, blowers, it should be easy to displace most of the clippings back into the verge, thus saving the poor cyclist expensive and annoying punctures on every ride through what seems to be most of the year. Can you answer that one?
Absolutely. There are 3 main points. I totally sympathise with Robert's predicament. Being married to a keen cyclist, I know what it is, and given that I get to mend the punctures, that's how it goes.
That's me.
The thing about hedge trimming and the rubbish on the road, there are several things that contribute to it. Robert's dead right that there are blowers that you can fit onto the hedge trimmer to blow everything back off the road, and that's true, and some people use them. But probably as important is, I've had this conversation with Richard, as you know, that if you only trim 1 year's growth, the hedge trimmings are much smaller pieces, there are less thorns and they're softer. You trim them in the summer, the thorns aren't as hard. They're not as hard as if you trim them in the winter when you get all this shrapnel all over the place. That's the first point.
He's always trying to get his own in, isn't he? Well, he's not here even.
No.
Well, Richard's away.
I'm sure Ricardo will have his say when he gets back. But the second point is how you trim the hedge. If the hedge is big and has got lots of volume, when you trim the top of the hedge, if you try and trim it flat, all of the material that the trimmer takes off goes everywhere in all directions. But if you have the top of the hedge rounded, the trimmer will blow the material back into the hedge all the time. And when you trim the inside of the hedge, if the hedge is big enough, it'll catch the material so it doesn't blow through it.
Oh, a body blow. We're just waiting for the uppercut.
And I rest my case on the basis that I've not had very many complaints from Heather the cyclist about Clifford's trimming of our roadside hedges, leaving thorns all over the place. And we don't sweep the road, and we don't use a blower either. And I think it's how we trim them and when we trim them.
Knockout!
He'll be back to you on this.
He's just lying on the floor. He's just completely gone. I'd say a little handy hint is change your tyres, because I've got some puncture-resistant tyres and they're fantastic. I had 3 punctures in a week before I got them. It does drive you mad. Anyway, and secondly, as a lover of countryside produce, would it be possible for landowners to leave a few more fruit trees, for example, blackthorn for the sloes, elder for the berries and damsons, uncut in the hedge? Not only would this benefit wildlife, but at least I can more easily find the sources for my sloe gin and fruit jams.
Personally, when I can find the time to pick the sloes for the sloe gin, I don't have any problem picking them from trimmed hedges. It's a bit like pruning trees. You get the fruit grows on the new growth each year, and that seems to be absolutely fine. And I come back to the thing that if you trim the hedge back too hard, you lose all the fruit and it doesn't work. It's how you trim the hedge.
I don't think you can kick a man when he's down, Phil.
I can.
Why doesn't Robert go to commons and open places? There are loads and loads of bushes out there that have sloes, berries of all sorts.
That's a fair comment, but there's loads of blackberries, sloes and rose hips and so on in our hedges, and I would think that goes for a lot of the hedges of Herefordshire, but you have to have a healthy hedge.
True.
So welcome to that 100 or so cycling members of the Hereford Wheelers who will see picking all our fruit.
They'll probably have to change their bikes and get some mountain bikes so they can go up on the commons.
Thank you very much. On we go to Alison and Plant of the Week.
Oh,
Right, what have you brought us, Al?
Lady smock today.
Or cuckoo flower, I
Cuckoo
believe.
flower. Yeah, apparently it's called cuckoo flower because it flowers when the cuckoo starts to sing, and it goes off flowering when the cuckoo goes home.
And when does the cuckoo come?
He comes in April, he sings his song in May, he changes his tune in the middle of June, and July he flies away.
So that's
There we go.
a long flowering time, which makes complete sense because in between here and Webley, there's just banks of lady smock on the way, and they're there from about now too.
Yeah, that's it. I saw it when I was coming off the motorway at Newport on the roundabout. There's a mass of it.
Yeah.
But we haven't heard a cuckoo yet.
No, we haven't.
No,
heard
any
of it.
day. I wonder who'll be the first to hear the cuckoo. It's
But
always
to
a
be
bit
fair, the lady smock isn't in flower yet either.
Well, that particular one
Well,
isn't.
that one isn't.
But
It's a
I
younger.
think that I've seen some others out there
Yeah.
that have got little flowers on them.
Describe it then, please, Al.
It has flowering stems up to sort of 8 to 20 inches high. It has like white or pale pink flowers on the end. Very delicate flower. And it flowers this time of year early because of the competition it has the rest of the time. So it starts to grow over the winter months, and then it flowers in April because of all the competition in the grass and all the rest of the flowers that come up. Quite a delicate little thing. Needs a bit more care and attention than the usual bog standard wildflowers. Found in damp meadows, hedgerows and streams. Loves sort of a wetter area. And partial or full sunlight. Loves that. Yeah.
And also, it's a caterpillar food plant of the orange tip butterfly.
Oh, there you go.
That's that gorgeous white one with the orange tips. And did you know that you can eat the leaves?
Yeah, you can. It's a herb family, mustard family.
And very good for your stomach.
Apparently rich in vitamin C.
Yes, they used to use it, Rach, to stop
Yeah.
scurvy.
I tell you what,
You've got over that now.
yeah, I tell you what, Richard isn't there. Should we put some in his next sandwich when he comes, and then we'll see what happens?
Yeah.
Thanks, Al, for that. I'm not very good with my plants, and you inform us, and when I listen to the podcast, I learn about a new one all the time. And so my knowledge of wildflower plants is getting much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and the Wiggly Wildflower Meadow has got beautiful snake's head fritillaries.
Oh, I went the other day and saw
Oh.
them out there, yeah.
And cowslips and Bethany.
Bethany, little
Bethany's
tiny
out.
flower.
Yeah, which looks really lovely.
That's cool.
And the thing I was going to ask you, Al, is we've got cleavers in the left-hand side. Do we just have to pull
Yeah, I'd
those
pull
out?
those out or they'd go a bit mad, wouldn't they, and smother them.
Yeah.
It's the trouble with cleavers.
An update on the turf versus the seed. The turf, the grasses and the plants is much, much higher.
The seeded area.
No, the turf area is much higher because it's had a better chance.
Oh, right.
But the seed looks to have more variation. But in the seed area, the cleavers are there. So I think we just need to pull those
Ah.
up to give it a bit more space.
Interesting.
Well, now it's time for the little one again. It's Monty's Wormcast.
The Wiggly Wormcast podcast by Monty, a weekly fact on worms. Mealworms love eating tea bags.
Thanks, Mont.
So we'll speak to you all next week. And if you'd like to get in contact with us, you can contact Rach at
Wigglywigglers.co.uk.
Heather at wigglywigglers.co.uk. Plant queries go to
Alison at wigglywigglers.co.uk.
You can comment on our blog at wigglywigglers.blogspot.com or go to our website, wigglywigglers.co.uk. Thanks for listening. Keep subscribing.
Come back,
Bye. I've had an email from Jane Markham, who makes the RSPB Bird Notes podcast. Toast is tickling her back so much that we can't concentrate. She has a...
No, she's having a
She's
moment.
having a moment. a
She
balm.
says she's molting and it's very itchy on one's back when one is a chocolate Labrador.
Could you apply a bit of scratching to it to stop it ruining our podcast, Phil?
I'm more worried about the carpet.
You introduce Monty.
Well, now it's time for the little one again. It's Monty's podcast.
Wormcast.
Oh, God. Sorry. Well, now it's time for the little one again. It's Monty's podcast.
Wormcast.
That's really funny.
Oh, where is Richard?